Well, let me just maybe start with, by way of introduction. I'm John Giles. I was elected the mayor of Mesa and took office a little less than a month ago. And my predecessor had, I think, a great tradition of every month or two having this type of an event where we sat down and had less of a monologue than a dialogue, where there are a couple of things that I'll throw out that I'm interested in. But the intent really is to have more interaction with people and to see what the media is interested in hearing about, and satisfy any curiosity that you might have about the city of Mesa and more specifically the mayor's office. So, having said that, maybe I'll just keep offering a little bit more introduction. I was born and raised in Mesa. Went to school here. Went to law school at ASU, practiced law really within probably a mile of here. I've spent most of my adult life either professionally or my childhood, and I operate a law practice in a historic home that's around the corner from the city hall, and served on the city council back in the 1990s. Felt like I'd worked that out of my system, but then when the opportunity presented itself to run again, I realized this is really nothing I would enjoy doing more than serving as the mayor of Mesa. And that's been my experience for the last month or so as well. It's been a very busy job. Start early and end late most nights, and get home and go, wow, that was a lot of fun. I hope I get to do the same thing again tomorrow, because I found that this is what I'm passionate about, and I'm really loving the job. So that's probably more introduction about me than you're interested in, but we're killing time until KTR arrives, so we'll talk about me for a little bit. Having said that, about, like I say, less than a month ago, we had a beautiful, I thought, swearing-in ceremony across the street where a lot of folks came to wish me well, and I greatly appreciated that. And at that time, I took the opportunity to talk a little bit about my vision for Mesa. And we launched a bit of I don't know if you call it a slogan or a icon or a theme, but we took the theme of Next Mesa. If you look at the Mesa logo, which I'm actually quite fond of, it shows physically the mesas one on top of another. And as I looked at that, it occurred to me that it was also a great way for us as a city as a city government to continue to motivate ourselves to not be content to be on one level, but to be constantly striving to get to the next level. And Mesa has made great strides, particularly in recent years, in terms of economic development and in other areas as well. And the thing that motivated me to want to run for mayor and to be more involved was to maintain that momentum and to maintain the desire to improve as a community and to not be satisfied with average or something less than what we can be as a community. So the whole rationale behind and the theme behind this Next Mesa program is to look ahead, to be constantly, as a city government and as a mayor's office, be thinking about what we can do to improve our community. And as part of that, for the last month or so, we've tried to have an increased emphasis out of the mayor's office on exactly what we're doing now, communicating, particularly through social media. We've launched new Facebook and Instagram and Twitter sites, as well as a blog. We've been posting a couple of times a week the mayor's blog called, coincidentally, Next Mesa at mesamayor.com. And that's been a great experience because it's allowed us to push out a lot of information maybe that before adopting the blog we weren't pushing out to the community. So that's described a little bit of my experience so far and talked about some of the things that I found interesting or that I would like people to know more about. So we're going to continue doing more and more of that, more social media, more traditional media, trying to take the level of communication to a next Mesa, to use that analogy again. Last week also to the web site, we added what's called a city chat feature that is a more of an interactive piece where we're soliciting, we're not just trying to push information out, but we're soliciting some community feedback, asking people for input and for critique and suggestions and comments on things that they'd like us to be more aware of. So hopefully the interactive side of that blog will become more and more popular as we get the word out and it becomes a bigger part of people's consciousness. Also, it was important to me to hit the ground running as mayor and to come in and actually work hard and have start making progress early on. And so to that end, there were a few things that we mentioned that I mentioned in the swearing-in ceremony that I've been working on, and I describe them as WIGs because we call them wildly important goals. I've been told that if you have more than 2 or 3 wildly important goals at a time, that's counterproductive because your focus is too spread out and you won't get things done. So my goal is to keep this up on the whiteboard and then hopefully erase them as quickly as they're accomplished. So I think we're close to erasing a few of the wildly important goals we've been working on for downtown restaurants, self-certification, and Mesa Fiber. All of these are goals that are kind of geared towards the next Mesa theme, particularly when it comes to economic development. Self-certification is a process through the, come on in folks, welcome. It's a process that's going to make it easier for people to apply for permits and licenses through the city, where if they come in and they have professionally certified plans stamped by architects and mechanical engineers that are insured and bonded, that the city will give a lot of deference to that, and that will speed up the process. Mesa Fiber is kind of in response, frankly, to the whole Google Fiber issue that has been going on across the country for the last few months. It was important to me that if Mesa was not going to be in the first round of Google Fiber, that we at least have the equivalent through other means so that we're not at a disadvantage as a community. So internally within city government, we've been working on really just bringing together all of the different components for fiber, whether that be in a commercial setting or neighborhoods or economic development or public access to Wi-Fi. So all of the different components of having access to the internet, having access to high-speed internet and to Wi-Fi are going to be incorporated into the Mesa Fiber program. And I'm comfortable saying that the residents of Mesa will have as much or more access to high-speed internet as anyone in the country. So that I'm excited at the success we've had in that so far. And then downtown restaurants, we continue to recruit and make business pitches and identify places for that to happen. So that's part of what's been occupying my time for the last month. I'll just keep talking about a couple other things that are important to me, if you don't mind. We do have a bond election coming up in the city of Mesa in November, a large bond election. And there's been a fair amount of interest from different parts of the community about wanting to know more about the bonds and also about home rule. And so I'll be submitting an op-ed in the local newspapers next week that gives my personal position on the topic. But from a city perspective, I think it is good for us to let people know that Mesa actually is a little different than most other cities not only locally but across the United States. I think it's fairly well known that Mesa does not have a primary property tax. And there's a little bit of interesting history on that. Back in 1946, the Mesa City Council eliminated the primary property tax, and they did it when they purchased the electric utility that serviced the city of Mesa. And there was a philosophical decision made at that point that we are not, as a community, going to place emphasis on funding city government through property tax, but rather we're going to aggressively go into the utility business, and we're going to purchase the electric utility. We're going to be heavily engaged in all the other utilities, and we're going to use that as a way to fund city operations rather than a primary property tax. So that philosophy was adopted in Mesa. That was a fairly unusual philosophy then, and it's a particularly unusual philosophy now, but it's the one that we follow and that we embrace. So we're proud of the fact that we don't have a primary property tax, but rather we use these business enterprises, utility services, to help fund our city government. So for that reason, occasionally Mesa's in a position, because we provide very large-scale commodities like electricity and water and wastewater, where we have to build large, expensive facilities. And this is one of those times. So on the bond election in November is a large water treatment plant. And every time you build a water treatment plant, you have to increase your wastewater treatment capacity. So that's another large part of the bonds, is to take care of those two essential services. And the rest of the bonds relate to the other utilities that Mesa operates, the gas and the electric. So I think it's important, just from a community education perspective, for us to get that information out so that people understand, why am I spending so much money on building utility infrastructure? And that's because you live in Mesa, and providing utility services is a big part of what the Mesa city government does. So I'm going to try to help get that word out, not only in forums like this, but also through op-ed pieces throughout the next couple of weeks. And then just in closing, before we start having the dialogue, there are a couple of great events coming up in the city of Mesa. Next Saturday is one of the biggest events that occurs in Mesa all year long. It's called Celebrate Mesa. We do it twice a year. Literally thousands of people, primarily families, young families, kids, will be out at the Red Mountain soccer fields, recreation centers, and that's this Saturday. Today's Wednesday, right? So just a couple days away. It's going to be extremely well attended, but it would be a shame if anybody who might have enjoyed the event didn't go because they don't know about it. So we're trying to push that information out as much as possible. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll be there with my family. I encourage everybody here to come. I guarantee you'll have a great time. There's also an event a couple of weeks from now called the Pizza Town Hall, geared towards high school age kids, where we try to encourage them to be involved and more educated when it comes to city government issues. So we'll be inviting as many of the high school age kids as we can to meet with the mayor and vice mayor on October the 23rd for that Pizza Town Hall. Mesa has what's called a Mayor's Youth Committee. That's a very active, strong organization. Has several representatives from each of the high schools. They're the ones that are primarily putting on that event. But again, it's a great event that we'd appreciate any publicity that you can help us offer. So having said that, I've exhausted my monologue, and I'm looking forward to chatting and answering any questions or discussing topics that you folks find interesting. Now, I think Melissa will tell you that this is being recorded by our Channel 11, then will be rebroadcast. And so if you don't mind, if you do have questions, if you could use our stick mic just so there's audio for the Channel 11 broadcast, we'd appreciate that. Great. So I'd open it up for any questions. Please. Yes, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Alex. Is it good? Okay. Hi, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Alex. I'm from KJZZ, the public radio station.
Yes, ma'am.
And my question is, what is going to happen with the plant, the Apple plant?
Yeah. Thank you. The facility that's out that Apple is located in and GT Technologies has been building in is one of the best locations for a business, I think, anywhere in the United States. It's been, and if you don't mind, I'll give just a little bit of history on the area. I was, as I indicated earlier, was on the city council back in the 1990s, and back then we had this dream of a part of town out by the Gateway Airport that we thought had a tremendous amount of potential. But at that point, it really was nothing more than a dream, because what we had was this 10,000-foot runway on an abandoned Air Force base, and a lot of jackrabbits and a lot of potential, but really nothing else. And so returning to city government now, almost 20 years later, it's been extremely exciting for me to return to that part of town and see how everything has literally come together so magically, where you've got freeways and universities and planned communities and airports with commercial service, and really everything you could possibly hope for has just matured at exactly the right time to make this part of Mesa literally the best place in the country to locate a business. And so we remain extremely excited about the potential and the reality for success that's out in that part of town. The building that Apple and GT are operating out of is, I think it would be a big mistake for the media or for others to think that this is somehow anything other than still the beginning of the story for that building. It's a 1.5 million square feet. It is extremely attractive for a variety of uses. I remain extremely optimistic that it's going to be used for the intended use of manufacturing for Apple. I have been in contact personally with representatives of Apple as this has been going on in the last few days. They've expressed to me their commitment to the city of Mesa and to that facility. So I remain optimistic that that's how things will go forward. But even if it doesn't for some reason, I remain extremely optimistic that that building is a special place, and as I indicated, that we're at the beginning of the story for that building and for the jobs that are going to be there for many, many years to come in the city of Mesa. We're involved. The folks that are operating and owning that building are involved in litigation, so it's going to we got to be a little patient and give some time for that process to play out. But I'll be very surprised if we're not all fairly satisfied with the outcome before too long.
Can I follow up on that?
Please,
Okay.
yeah.
So it had been estimated that roughly 700 jobs would may be lost because of this. So I was wondering your thoughts on that in terms of, you talked about economic development. And then secondly, you mentioned litigation. I don't know if you can kind of tell us what that's about.
Sure. Well, if you don't mind, I'll start backwards. As you all know, there was a bankruptcy filing out of state by GT. We've got to allow that process to go forward a little bit. But Apple, I think, is a little bit restricted in what it can do and say in the context of being involved in litigation with GT, and as is GT. So there's going to be a little lack of information for a while as that process plays out. But as I indicated, we have been in touch. They've been very communicative to the city and reassuring that and I personally have talked with the folks at Apple, and they've expressed their support for Mesa as a community and for that facility. So that's why I'm optimistic. It's not just a Pollyannish approach. I've been told by those that are involved that they remain committed to the city. So that's good news for everyone, I believe. And I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
It was estimated that roughly.
Oh, the jobs. That is the sad part here. Hopefully, that doesn't happen. Hopefully, there's some negotiation that takes place sooner than later. There's always some strategy involved in litigation and in bankruptcy filings, so I'm not sure that the pleadings and the things that are being asked for are exactly what everyone wants to see happen. Hopefully, there's some posturing going on. So I think we've got our fingers crossed that there won't be loss of employment, and if there is, that it will be short-lived. But my concern is for those folks that work there. Hopefully this will not be a huge disruption to their lives, and we'll be able to get them back to work as soon as possible. But that's what we've got to give a little bit of time to, I think, to let the bankruptcy filings play out.
Hi, Mia Garcia, Fox 10. So who owns the building? Is it GT and Apple, or just GT?
Apple owns the building. Apple purchased it from First Solar about a year ago, and they've invested heavily in the building, almost to the tune of $500 million, which is another reason why I remain very optimistic. It's a great building to start with, but it's been improved dramatically even since the time that Apple purchased it. So it's not the type of a facility or the type of an investment that a smart company like Apple or GT lets go to waste at all. So, but Apple owns the building. GT is a tenant there, and they're producing products for Apple in a building owned by Apple.
So a possibility that maybe Apple could bring in another company that does kind of glass technology is
Yes, I think that's a real possibility. I think Apple's committed to the technology, they're committed to the facility, they're committed to the city, so I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that happen, but that's just speculation on my part.
Okay, now typically with lawsuits and bankruptcy and that's years, but do you think there could be some sort of agreement reached before then?
I do. I think my understanding is there's hearings that are set in the short term within the next few weeks that are going to resolve some of these questions. So I'm optimistic for that reason. I don't think, given the amount of money that's invested and the nature of this business, that either Apple or GT wants or expects this to drag on for years. I don't see that scenario as being likely. I think before a few months are over, we'll all be fairly clear on what the future short-term and long-term for that building and for the manufacturing there is going to be.
And as far as incentives that the city has offered so far, can
Sure.
you-
The city of Mesa did not offer any incentives. The state of Arizona, through its business development operations, did offer some incentives, but Apple has not received those. And if the manufacturing doesn't progress, then they won't. So the incentives that were offered from the state haven't been paid and won't be paid until certain benchmarks are met with regard to the employment and the production. So to this point, no public incentives have been paid from the state. No public incentives, there was never part of a deal with the city of Mesa for any incentives.
Okay, and last question, different topic, but this weekend, woman who fell through a grate at the Mesa Arts Center, any update on that investigation?
No, I mean, it's a horrible accident. We obviously, this was it sounds like a nice German architect that was there enjoying the beautiful architecture of the Mesa Arts Center, and a tragedy occurred and she fell, and we all, personally, I feel horrible about that. I was at the facility the night before enjoying it. It's a great facility. There's hundreds of people that were walking around enjoying the outside and admiring the building, so it's a very unfortunate accident. We will do everything we can to make sure that it's a safe location. I don't know to what extent where blame lies, but regardless of that, we certainly wish her well and feel feel bad that she was injured on a Mesa property.
Richard Dyer with the Independent Newspapers.
Yeah.
Sir, you mentioned the Apple plant, but that's part of the 1.5 square mile technology corridor. You know, them not having a tenant there, will that affect that technology corridor at all, or will it have any kind of impact on going forward, looking for folks to locate there?
Well, I agree. I think there is some synergistic benefits that come from having Apple occupy that building, and so if there's a disruption in that, that's not a good thing, certainly. But the more, frankly, the old saying, "There's no such thing as bad publicity," may have some application in this scenario, because what it does is it helps us shine a brighter light on that stretch of road, and the more publicity for that part of town, the better for us. The Elliott Road corridor, we're anchored at the corner on Signal Butte with the Apple facility, is like really no other place in the valley. We've had hot spots in the valley for technological development, and those have, for the most part, played out. And so the next location for all of these types of facilities in the valley is going to be along that Elliott Road corridor. There's a reason that Apple cited their facility where they did. It's because it's literally the best place in the country to put a facility like that. The amount of electricity, for example, that's available into that building is mind-boggling. You could literally run several small cities and have room left over for some aircraft carriers by the electric capacity for that building, and that's duplicated the whole way down the Elliott Road corridor. So between dark fiber and SRP-provided electricity and anything else you could want, wastewater, groundwater through the city of Mesa, it's an ideal location for businesses like the Apple plant. And the more that we talk about that, the more we get that word out, the better it will be for the economic development in that area. So absolutely, we are anxious for Apple to be there and to be happy and to be productive, but I see a bright future for the neighborhood regardless of how the litigation affects whether that building is open or not.
One last question.
Yes.
You mentioned the bonds and the home rule, but also the general plan. How is the city getting the information out about that voters will have a chance to vote on the 2040 general plan, and how also is the mayor's office doing so?
Great, thank you. As I indicated, we're going to be publishing some op-eds. I am using the mayor's blog. There's a post going out, I think, today or in the next day or two that has a lot of the details for the bonds. I personally published some information in the publicity pamphlet that's going out on those issues. And I need to also make sure that I don't advocate during the course of this because I'm on Channel 11 and I can't express my personal point of view about how people ought to vote on that. So at this point, what we're doing is just pushing out information of why Mesa does do bonds the way it does, what the home rule, why that's important, why it's not important. And if you don't mind, just on the home rule issue, I'll help people understand that home rule is a state requirement that was adopted during the Carter administration to put a limit on the amount of money that a city can spend. Mesa, since that period of time, has roughly doubled in size of population. So the question is, should Mesa be limited to those spending limits from several decades ago, or Mesa ought to be allowed to spend the money that it generates through shared income and from the state and all of the various sources that we have to provide to meet its current budgetary needs. That's the question that's being presented from home rule. And you raised the general plan. Our city staff has engaged the community over the last years. There's been a lot of meetings with the community, a lot of input solicited from neighborhoods as to what direction. It's very consistent with this Next Mesa attitude. Where do you want to see Mesa go? How do we want to get there? What emphasis should we place on different parts of our community? All of those have now been embodied in an updated general plan that has less to do with zoning changes, but it's more of a change of attitude as to what emphasis we ought to place on future development. So that's what the citizens of Mesa are voting on with regard to the new general plan. We hope that it's a vision that people will adopt, but if they don't, then that's their choice to make. We'll follow accordingly. So thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Sorry to go back to the Apple plant.
That's
I have
fine. I
another-
know it's a big concern. Yeah.
Exactly. So from what I understand, that's Apple is not the first company to kind of have a hiccup with this plant. Is there maybe another issue that's causing multiple companies to have hiccups?
Good question. The building, you're correct, was built by a company called First Solar. And you may recall a few years ago there were some financial incentives from the federal government with regard to the solar industry that have changed. And so when that industry changed, the plans for that company to occupy that building changed. So it's not an issue related to the building. Everyone loves the building, but there were some economic issues related to the solar industry that made it necessary for First Solar to offer it to Apple for sale. So I'm not aware of anything but praise for the building. I know SRP has done a fantastic job of coming in and locating huge power facilities immediately adjacent to the building. The city has done the same thing with regard to the other utilities. So without being a Pollyanna, salesman for the city, I think anybody you talk to will say the building is world class.
Which is unfortunate.
Just an economic hiccup with the solar industry for the first occupant, and then we'll see how the Apple GT issue resolves. Well, again, thank you very much for coming. We look forward to doing this again in the future, and again, more just providing opportunities for you folks to get what's on your chest off and have us help you understand things. We appreciate the chance to lobby you on some of these other issues that are important to us. And I look forward to continuing to serve as the mayor of Mesa. As I indicated earlier, I'm loving the job and look forward to doing everything I can to help Mesa go to the next level as a community. So thank you for being here.